The Vorax command ship hung in orbit above the small colony world like a predator watching its prey. Commander Zethkel stood at the observation window, his four arms folded behind his back as he studied the planet below. The conquest had been swift and efficient, just as the Vorax dominion preferred. The human settlement had fallen in less than 3 days. "Report," Zethkel said, not turning from the window. Subcommander Trillax stepped forward, his scaled skin shimmering under the cold blue lights of the bridge. "We have secured the colony, Commander. Most of the human population has been relocated to the labor camps. However, we encountered unexpected resistance from a small military unit." Unexpected resistance? Zethkel turned now, his dark eyes narrowing. The Vorax had conquered dozens of species across the galaxy. Resistance was common. Unexpected resistance was rare. "A unit of 12 human soldiers, Commander. They were stationed at a research outpost on the northern continent. When we moved to capture them, they fought back, fiercely. And we lost 47 warriors, taking them alive. 47. Zethkel was silent for a long moment. 47 Vorax warriors against 12 humans. The numbers did not make sense. The Vorax were larger, stronger, and better equipped. Their armor could withstand most human weapons. Their soldiers were trained from birth to fight and kill. "How many humans did we kill?" Zethkel asked. "None, Commander. None. They surrendered when they ran out of ammunition. All 12 are alive. We have them in holding cells on the surface." Zethkel walked slowly across the bridge, his clawed feet clicking against the metal floor. He stopped at a console and pulled up the files on the captured humans. Military identification tags, service records, and biological data scrolled across the screen. He studied each face carefully. "They are soldiers," he said. "Regular military, not special forces, not enhanced warriors, just soldiers." "Yes, Commander, standard infantry unit. They were assigned to protect the research station." "And they killed 47 of our warriors, without losing a single member of their own." Trillax shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, Commander." Zethkel closed the files and turned back to the window. The Vorax had been expanding through this sector of space for decades. They had encountered humans only recently, and the early encounters had suggested they would be easy to conquer. Humans were soft. They were weak compared to Vorax physiology. They did not have natural weapons like claws or fangs. Their lifespans were short, and they reproduced slowly. But the reports from the front lines told a different story. Human colonies did not surrender easily. Human soldiers fought with a ferocity that surprised even the most experienced Vorax commanders. And now this. 12 soldiers holding off an assault that should have overwhelmed them in minutes. "I want to interrogate them," Zethkel said, "personally." "Commander, with respect, we have professional interrogators who—" "I want to understand them, Trillax, not just extract information. I want to know what makes these creatures fight the way they do." Trillax bowed his head. "As you wish, Commander." The holding cells on the planet's surface were crude but effective. Metal walls, energy barriers, and armed guards at every entrance. The 12 human soldiers had been separated into individual cells, standard procedure for preventing communication and coordination among prisoners. Zethkel walked past the cells, studying each human in turn. They were a mixed group. Different skin tones, different heights, different builds. Some were male, some female. The youngest looked barely adult by human standards. The oldest had gray streaks in his dark hair. What struck Zethkel was their composure. Prisoners of the Vorax usually showed fear. Some wept. Some begged. Some tried to fight their restraints until they injured themselves. But these humans sat quietly in their cells, watching him pass with calm, steady eyes. He stopped at the cell of the gray-haired human. According to the files, this was Sergeant Major Thomas Chen, the unit's senior enlisted soldier. 32 years of military service, multiple combat deployments, decorated several times for valor. You killed many of my warriors, Zethkal said. Chen looked up at him. Not enough, apparently. You are prisoners now. Your resistance accomplished nothing. Did it? Zethkal studied the human's face. There was no fear there, no despair. If anything, there was something that looked almost like satisfaction. You lost, Zethkal said. Your colony is ours. Your people are enslaved. You and your soldiers will spend the rest of your lives in labor camps if you survive that long. What do you have to be pleased about? Chen smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You don't know much about humans, do you? I know enough. You are a young species. You have only been in space for a few centuries. Your military technology is inferior to ours. Your biological capabilities are limited. You should not have been able to resist us at all. And yet here we are, 12 soldiers who held off your entire assault force for 6 hours. A temporary victory, meaningless in the end. Is it? Chen leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Zethkal's face. Let me tell you something about humans, Commander. We don't leave our people behind, ever. Zethkal tilted his head, a gesture of confusion among his species. I do not understand. You will. Lieutenant Sarah Torres sat in her cell and counted the hours. It had been 18 hours since the surrender. 18 hours since they had run out of ammunition and made the choice to live rather than die fighting to the last. Some of the younger soldiers had wanted to make that final stand, to go out in a blaze of glory. Torres had talked them down. Dead soldiers can't be rescued, she had told them. Live soldiers can. Now she waited. The Vorax guards changed every 4 hours. The feeding schedule was erratic, probably intentional. The cells were cold and they had been given only thin blankets. Standard prisoner softening techniques. Torres had been trained to resist them. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her mother would receive notification within the week that her unit had been captured. Her brother, who served in the Navy, would hear about it through the military network. And somewhere, somehow, the rescue protocols would be activated. Torres knew the statistics. Rescue missions were expensive. They required significant resources and put additional lives at risk. From a purely logical standpoint, rescuing a dozen soldiers from a planet occupied by thousands of enemy warriors made no sense. The math didn't work. But humans didn't make decisions based purely on math. In the cell across from her, Private First Class Marcus Webb was doing push-ups. He was the youngest of the group, barely 20 years old. This was his first deployment and it had turned into a disaster. But he hadn't broken. Torres was proud of him. Webb, she called softly, save your energy. Can't sit still, Lieutenant. Makes me crazy. They're going to interrogate us soon. You need to be sharp. Webb stopped his push-ups and sat back against the wall. Do you think they're coming for us, ma'am? Torres didn't hesitate. Yes. How can you be sure? Because that's what we do. It's who we are. Webb nodded slowly. He was young, but he understood. Every human soldier understood. It was the first thing they learned in basic training, before weapons handling, before tactics, before anything else. We don't leave our people behind. It wasn't just a motto. It was a promise. A sacred covenant between every human soldier and every other human soldier. You go into danger knowing that if you fall, your brothers and sisters will come for you. You fight harder because of that promise. You survive longer because of that hope. And sometimes, you hold off an enemy force of hundreds with only 12 soldiers, because you know that every hour you survive is another hour for rescue to arrive. On the Vorax command ship, Communications Officer Drexel noticed something strange on his sensors. A brief flicker of activity at the edge of the system. It lasted only a moment, then disappeared. Sub-Commander, he said, I'm detecting an anomaly in Sector 7. Trillax walked over to the console. What kind of anomaly? I'm not sure. It could be a sensor glitch, or it could be a ship using stealth technology. Human stealth technology. Possibly. The signature is consistent with human drive systems, but it was too brief to identify clearly. Trillax frowned. They had destroyed the colony's communication arrays in the initial assault. No distress signal should have been sent, but the Vorax had learned that humans were resourceful. Perhaps one of them had found a way to transmit a message before the arrays went down. Increase sensor sweeps in that sector, Trillax ordered, and notify the commander. Sergeant Chen had been right about one thing. The Vorax did not know much about humans. They knew the basics: human biology, human technology, human military organization. But they did not understand what drove humans, what made them fight, what made them refuse to surrender even when defeat was certain. Commander Zethkel was beginning to suspect that this lack of understanding was a significant problem. He had interrogated 3 of the human soldiers so far. All 3 had given him nothing but name, rank, and identification number. Standard military training, he knew. Prisoners were supposed to resist interrogation, but there was something else in their responses, something in the way they looked at him when they refused to answer his questions. They were not afraid, they were waiting. Waiting for what? Zethkel pulled up the tactical display of the system. His fleet consisted of 1 command ship, 4 cruisers, and 12 destroyers, more than enough to hold a single colony world against any human counterattack. The nearest human military base was 3 systems away. Even if they sent a relief force immediately, it would take weeks to arrive. But the look in the prisoner's eyes nagged at him. They knew something he didn't. He activated the communication system. Trillax, report to my quarters immediately. 5 minutes later, the sub-commander stood before him. You summoned me, Commander. Tell me about human rescue missions. Trillax looked confused. Rescue missions, Commander. One of the prisoners mentioned that humans do not leave their people behind. What does this mean? I believe it is a cultural practice among human military forces. They place great value on recovering captured or wounded personnel. All military forces value their personnel. That is not unusual. No, Commander, you misunderstand. Humans place extreme value on this practice. They will risk many lives to save a few. They will spend enormous resources to recover a single soldier. It is considered sacred, I believe. Zethkel was quiet for a moment. This is inefficient. Extremely inefficient by our standards. The Dominion would never waste resources on such operations. If soldiers are captured, they are considered lost. Their sacrifice serves the greater good of the conquest. But humans do not think this way. No, Commander, they do not. Zethkel walked to his window and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human forces were gathering. He was certain of it now, not because it made logical sense, but because he had seen the look in Sergeant Chen's eyes. Increase alert status to maximum, he said, and double the guard on the prisoners. Commander. They're coming, Trillax. I don't know when and I don't know how many, but they're coming, and we need to be ready. 3 systems away, the United Earth Navy carrier Relentless was preparing for war. Admiral Jennifer Park stood on the bridge, watching as her fleet assembled around her flagship. 2 carriers, 8 destroyers, 6 frigates, and 2 troop transports carrying a full battalion of Marines. Admiral, her aide said, we've received confirmation from intelligence. The Vorax have taken 12 prisoners from the Kepler 442 colony. They are being held on the surface. Condition of the prisoners. Alive, as of our last intelligence update. The Vorax are interrogating them but haven't started using enhanced methods yet. Park nodded grimly. Enhanced methods, a polite term for torture. She had seen what the Vorax did to prisoners. She had no intention of letting that happen to her people. Fleet status. All ships report ready for combat, Admiral. Marines are loaded and briefed. Pilots are standing by. Then let's go get our people. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, beginning the journey to Kepler 442. It would take them 36 hours to arrive. 36 hours during which the prisoners would have to hold on. Hold on to hope. Hold on to faith. Hold on to the knowledge that they had not been forgotten. Because humans never forgot their own. And they never left them behind. Private Marcus Webb had lost track of time. The cells had no windows and the lights never changed. He could have been in there for a day or a week. He didn't know. What he did know was that the Vorax had started calling prisoners for interrogation more frequently. Corporal Davis had come back with bruises on his face. Specialist Kim had a cut above her eye. The interrogations were getting more aggressive. Webb had not been called yet. He was the youngest, the least experienced. The Vorax probably thought he would be easy to break. They were saving him for later. He did push-ups to keep his mind occupied. He recited the training manuals in his head. He thought about his family, his friends, his life before the military. And he held on to one simple thought, one burning belief that kept him going. They were coming. He didn't know how he knew. He couldn't explain it logically. But he felt it in his bones, in his blood, in his soul. Somewhere out there, ships were moving. Soldiers were preparing. Plans were being made, because that was what humans did. We don't leave our people behind. Webb finished his push-ups and sat back against the wall. He was hungry, tired, and scared. But he was not broken. He would not be broken. Because help was on the way. Commander Zethkel studied the sensor data with growing unease. The anomalies were increasing. Brief flickers of activity at the edges of the system. Ships, he was certain now. Human ships, using stealth technology to approach without being detected. How many, he asked. We cannot determine exact numbers, Commander. The stealth technology makes it difficult to get accurate readings. But based on the pattern of anomalies, we estimate at least 15 to 20 vessels. That's a significant force. Yes, Commander, more than we expected. Zethkel turned to the tactical display. His fleet was powerful, but it was designed for conquest, not defense. His ships were spread out around the planet, maintaining control over the colony. If the humans attacked in force, he would need to concentrate his fleet quickly. Recall all ships to defensive positions around the command ship, he ordered, and prepare for combat. Commander, if we recall the ships, we lose control of the colony. The colony is worthless if we lose our fleet. The humans are not coming to liberate the colony, Trillax. They're coming for the prisoners. Trillax looked surprised. Just for 12 soldiers. Just for 12 soldiers, Zethkel confirmed. This is what I was trying to explain. Humans place irrational value on individual lives. They will risk everything to rescue a few of their own. But that makes no strategic sense. No, it doesn't, and that is what makes them dangerous. Zethkel looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, human warships were preparing to attack. They were coming for their people. Nothing would stop them. And for the first time in his long military career, Commander Zethkel felt something he had never felt before. Fear. The next 12 hours passed slowly for the prisoners. More interrogations, more pressure. The Vorax wanted information about human military capabilities, defense positions, fleet dispositions. The prisoners gave them nothing. Sergeant Chen was called for his third interrogation. When he returned, he was limping and there was blood on his uniform, but his eyes were still calm, still waiting. Sarge, Lieutenant Torres called softly, "You okay?" "I'll live," Chen replied. "How's everyone holding up?" "Solid. Webb's doing push-ups again." Chen managed a weak smile. "Good kid. He's going to be okay." "Yeah, he is." Torres looked at her senior NCO through the barrier of their cells. She could see the pain he was trying to hide. The Vorax had been rough with him. "Sarge, how much longer do you think?" Chen closed his eyes. Not long now, the guards are nervous, something's happening. You can tell. After 32 years, you learn to read people, even aliens. They're scared of something. Tors felt a surge of hope. If the Vorax were scared, that meant something was coming, something they couldn't handle. Hang on, everyone, she called out to the other cells. It won't be much longer now. From somewhere down the corridor, Private Webb's voice came back. We're not going anywhere, Lieutenant. Tors smiled despite everything. No, they weren't going anywhere, and neither were the people coming to rescue them. Admiral Park's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Immediately, her sensors painted a picture of the tactical situation. Vorax ships clustered around a command vessel in high orbit. Ground forces spread across the colony, a holding facility on the northern continent where her people were being held. All ships battle stations, she ordered. Execute rescue operation. The human fleet moved forward like a well-oiled machine. Destroyers and frigates formed a screen around the carriers. Fighter squadrons launched from their bays, filling space with small, fast craft that would harry the enemy and draw their fire. Contact, her tactical officer reported. Vorax fleet is moving to intercept. Good, let them come. All ships weapons free. The battle began with a flash of light as the first missiles crossed the gap between the fleets. Human warships, built for speed and firepower, danced through space, pouring fire into the larger, slower Vorax vessels. Vorax weapons hammered at human shields, but the human ships were too fast, too agile, too unpredictable. And while the space battle raged, 2 troop transports slipped through the chaos, heading for the planet below. Commander Zethkel watched in horror as his fleet crumbled. The human ships were everywhere, striking from multiple angles, never staying still long enough to target. His cruisers were taking heavy damage. 2 destroyers were already crippled. Commander, we're detecting landing craft heading for the surface. Stop them. We can't. The human fighters are intercepting all attempts to engage the transports. Zethkel slammed his fist against the console. The humans had planned this perfectly. The fleet battle was a distraction, a massive diversion to allow their ground forces to reach the planet, and it was working. Order the ground troops to defend the holding facility, he said. Those prisoners must not be rescued. Yes, Commander. But even as he gave the order, Zethkel knew it was too late. The humans were coming, and they would not be stopped. The Marine landing craft hit the atmosphere at a steep angle, their heat shields glowing red against the friction of re-entry. Inside, Captain Ricardo Vasquez checked his weapon one more time and looked at his Marines. Listen up, he shouted over the roar of the descent. We've got 12 of our people down there waiting for us. They've been holding on for days, believing we would come. We are not going to let them down. We hit hard, we hit fast, we grab our people and we get out. Understood? Hora, the Marines responded. 30 seconds to landing. The craft shuddered as it passed through a layer of turbulence. Through the small viewport, Vasquez could see the surface rushing up to meet them. The holding facility was just ahead, a squat gray structure surrounded by Vorax defensive positions. 20 seconds. The craft's nose came up, and the landing thrusters fired, slowing their descent. Outside, he could see other craft landing around them, disgorging Marines who immediately spread out in combat formations. 10 seconds, weapons hot. The landing ramp dropped, and Vasquez was out, his boots hitting the alien soil as he raised his rifle. Vorax defenders were already firing, their energy weapons scorching the air around him. But the Marines were faster, more aggressive, more determined. They were here for their people, and nothing was going to stop them. Private Webb heard the explosions first, then the gunfire, then the sounds of combat getting closer and closer to the holding facility. They're here, someone shouted. They're here. The Vorax guards were panicking, running back and forth, unsure whether to stay at their posts or join the fight outside. Through the walls, Webb could hear the distinctive crack of human weapons, the sounds he had trained with since basic. Human weapons, human soldiers coming for them. The door to the cell block burst open, and 3 Marines in full combat armor stormed in. They moved with precise, practiced efficiency, clearing corners and covering angles. "Friendlies," one of them shouted, "we're here to get you out." "Over here," Lieutenant Torres called. "We're in the cells." The Marines moved to the control panel and disabled the energy barriers. One by one, the cells opened and the prisoners stepped out. 12 soldiers, battered and bruised but alive and free. Sergeant Chen clasped hands with the lead Marine. "Good timing, Captain." "Sorry we kept you waiting, Sergeant. Let's get the hell out of here." They moved through the facility in a tight formation, Marines on the outside, freed prisoners in the middle. Gunfire crackled around them as the rescue force fought its way back to the extraction point. Vorax warriors fell before them, overwhelmed by the ferocity of the human assault. Webb stayed close to the Marines, marveling at their precision and power. These were the people who had come for them, who had crossed 3 star systems and fought through an enemy fleet, all to rescue 12 soldiers. Because that was what humans did. We don't leave our people behind. The extraction was brutal but successful. Marine casualties were light. The prisoners were loaded onto the transports, which lifted off under heavy cover fire. In orbit, the human fleet was withdrawing, having accomplished its mission. The Vorax fleet, bloodied and beaten, did not pursue. Admiral Park watched from the bridge of the Relentless as the transports docked safely. "Report." All 12 prisoners recovered, Admiral. Various injuries but no fatalities. Marine casualties, 3 wounded, none killed. Park closed her eyes for a moment. 3 wounded to rescue 12 prisoners. The math still didn't make sense, but she didn't care about the math. "Well done, everyone. Set course for home." The fleet jumped to faster than light, leaving the Kepler 442 system behind. Behind them, the Vorax licked their wounds and tried to understand what had happened. Commander Zethkel stood on the bridge of his damaged command ship, staring at the empty space where the human fleet had been. They had come so far, risked so much, lost so much, all for 12 prisoners. It made no sense. And yet, as Zethkel thought about it, he began to understand. The humans had not come to win a battle. They had not come to liberate the colony. They had come to send a message. We do not leave our people behind. It was a message to the prisoners, a message to the Vorax, a message to every species in the galaxy. If you capture human soldiers, their people will come for them, no matter how far, no matter how dangerous, no matter the cost. And that message, Zethkel realized, was more powerful than any weapon. Because an enemy who will sacrifice everything to rescue their own is an enemy who cannot be broken, cannot be defeated, cannot be conquered. Zethkel looked out at the stars and made a decision. He would recommend to the Dominion High Command that they reconsider their strategy against humanity. These creatures were not like the other species they had conquered. They were something different, something dangerous. Something that the Vorax, for all their strength, might not be able to overcome. On the carrier Relentless, the rescued prisoners were being treated in the medical bay. Doctors and nurses moved among them, tending to injuries, checking vital signs, and offering words of comfort. Sergeant Chen sat on a bed, getting a cut on his head bandaged. Lieutenant Torres sat next to him, a blanket around her shoulders. "I told them," Chen said quietly. "When the commander interrogated me, I told him they would come for us. He didn't believe me." "He believes it now," Torres replied. "Yeah, he does." They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the sounds of the medical bay. Around them, their soldiers were being cared for. Webb was telling a group of Marines about the push-ups he had done to stay sane. Corporal Davis was getting his bruises treated. Specialist Kim was already asleep, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "We made it," Tor said. "We did. Because they came for us. Because they always come for us. That's the promise. That's who we are." Tors nodded. She had always known it intellectually, had been trained on it, tested on it, believed in it. But now she had lived it. She had been on the other side of that promise and had seen it fulfilled. "We don't leave our people behind." It wasn't just words. It was truth. It was faith. It was the heart and soul of what it meant to be human, to be a soldier, to be part of something greater than yourself. The Vorax would learn. Sooner or later, every enemy learned. You could capture human soldiers, torture them, threaten them, try to break them. But you could never take away their hope, because they knew with absolute certainty that their brothers and sisters were coming for them. And nothing in the universe could stop that. Private Webb walked through the medical bay, looking at his fellow soldiers. They had been through hell together and they had come out the other side. Not because they were special, not because they were the best, but because they were human. He thought about his family, about the letter he would write to his mother when they got back to Earth. He thought about the training he would continue, the deployments he would face, the challenges that lay ahead. And he thought about the promise. We don't leave our people behind. Webb had understood it before, in the abstract way that all young soldiers understand it. But now he truly knew it. He had felt it in the cold darkness of that cell, when hope seemed impossible. He had heard it in the explosions and gunfire as the rescue force fought their way to him. He had seen it in the eyes of the Marines who burst through the door and set them free. This was what it meant to be human, to be part of a species that would move heaven and earth to save their own. To know that no matter how far you fell, no matter how dark things got, someone would come for you. It was terrifying for their enemies, but for humans, it was the greatest comfort imaginable. Webb found an empty bed and lay down. He was safe now. He was free. And somewhere out there, the Vorax were learning a lesson they would never forget. When you capture human soldiers, their people come for them. Always. No matter what. And that was why rescue missions exist. The news of the rescue spread quickly through human space. It was a small victory in a larger conflict, but it resonated deeply with humans everywhere. 12 soldiers, captured by an enemy force, had been rescued against all odds. The promise had been kept, as it always was. Admiral Park received commendations for the operation. Captain Vasquez and his Marines were decorated for valor. The rescued soldiers were given leave to recover and reunite with their families. But the most important result was something that couldn't be measured in medals or commendations. It was the message that the rescue sent to every human soldier serving in the conflict, to every human civilian watching the news, to every enemy commander planning their next move. We don't leave our people behind. It was a simple statement, 5 words, but it carried the weight of human history, of countless battles fought and lives saved, of a species that refused to accept that any of its members were expendable. The Vorax Dominion would eventually sue for peace. Their strategists had calculated the cost of fighting a species that would pay any price to rescue its own, and concluded that victory was impossible. You could win battles against such a species, but you could never win the war. Because humans didn't fight for territory or resources or power. They fought for each other. And that bond, that unbreakable connection between soldier and soldier, was stronger than any weapon the Vorax possessed. Years later, the Battle of became a standard case study in military academies across human space. Officers studied the tactics of the rescue operation, the coordination between the fleet and ground forces, the calculated risks and split-second decisions that made it successful. But the most important lesson wasn't about tactics or strategy. It was about the principle that had driven the operation from the start. We don't leave our people behind. Cadets memorized those words on their first day. They recited them before every mission. They lived them throughout their careers. And when they found themselves in danger, captured or wounded or lost behind enemy lines, they held on to those words like a lifeline. Because they knew the truth. They knew the promise. They knew that no matter what happened, their brothers and sisters would come for them. Private Marcus Webb eventually became Sergeant Major Marcus Webb, the senior enlisted soldier of an entire division. He told the story of his capture and rescue to countless young soldiers, always ending with the same words. They came for us, they always come for us, and when it's your turn to go get our people, you'll do the same, because that's who we are, that's what it means to be human. And the young soldiers would nod, understanding. They would carry that lesson with them through their careers, through the battles and hardships that lay ahead. They would pass it on to the next generation, and the next, until it became as natural as breathing. We don't leave our people behind. It was more than a motto, more than a policy, more than a tradition. It was the heart of humanity. And it was why, throughout the galaxy, species learned to fear capturing human soldiers. Because when you took one of them, you weren't just taking a prisoner. You were summoning an army. An army that would cross the stars and brave any danger to bring their people home. That was the lesson of Kepler 442. That was the lesson the Vorax learned, to their eternal regret. And that was why rescue missions exist. Not because they make strategic sense, not because the math works out, not because they're the logical choice, but because humans refuse to accept that any of their own are beyond saving. And in that refusal, in that stubborn, irrational, magnificent determination, lay the true strength of humanity. A strength that no enemy could ever defeat.